Hi, this is Chris of Highline Guitars, and you're watching episode 57 from the Luthier's Workbench. In this episode, I'm going to talk once again about grain fillers. Now, I know I've talked a lot about grain fillers in the last several episodes, but it's become clear to me that there are so many different ways that you can fill grain that it's hard to cover it all in one episode. And in the past episodes, what I talked about were some of my homemade recipes, like my water-based joint filler acrylic paint mix and my boiled linseed oil and 4F pumice mix, which both work really well. But in this episode, I was going to talk about a commercially made grain filler that I also use that I really like. In fact, it's really become more of my go-to grain filler, and that is Aqua Coat's water-based gel grain filler. And the reason why I like this product so much is because, first of all, because it's a water-based filler, cleanup is a breeze. In fact, I really don't have any cleanup at all because I apply it with paper towels and throw them away. But I don't have to worry about solvents and oils and that sort of thing and spontaneous combustion. And because it's a water-based, they call it an eco-friendly low VOC product. VOC stands for volatile organic compounds, and every kind of paint and finish and grain filler that we use contains different levels of VOCs. The higher the level, the more damaging it is to the environment and to our lungs. The lower it is, the better it is. So this one is advertised as eco-friendly, and I notice it has very low, almost non-existent odor. So you can use this, literally in your kitchen, and it's not going to bother you or anybody else. The other thing I like about it is it dries crystal clear. Now in the container, it looks white, but it's not. Once you apply it and spread it thin, it turns clear, and then as it dries crystal clear. So I like that feature, and it allows me to apply it over color, and then when it dries, that color isn't altered in any way. So I'll bring you in close up, and I'm going to show you how I use it on this ash-topped guitar. There are different ways that you can apply Aqua Coat to the wood. You can trowel it on and trowel it off, which is what some people like to do, or you can just apply it by wiping it on, with a paper towel or a clean cloth. I prefer to use a paper towel or a clean cloth and just wipe it on. And the reason for that is because my guitars always have a lot of beveled edges, round overs, comfort carves, things like that. And it's just easier to wipe it on. And I found that it doesn't really work any better to trowel it on and trowel it off as opposed to using a rag. They work both about the same. Now, one thing to remember is because it's a water-based product, there will be a little bit of shrinkage after or as it dries. Because of that, you may have to apply a couple of coats. So what you'll do is you'll apply a coat, let it dry, you'll lightly sand it back with some 220 to 320 grit sandpaper, and then you'll apply a second coat, and you'll maybe even have to do a third coat depending on how pronounced the grain is. But usually 2 to 3 coats will fill the grain, and from that point you'll be able to sand it smooth and continue on. Now, also, another thing to bear in mind is Aqua Coat does not accept stain or dye once it's been applied. As a result, you're going to want to apply this after you've already dyed or stained the wood. Now, if you're going to paint your guitar, you can go ahead and apply this to the raw wood, sand it down smooth, and then apply your paint. But if you're going to dye it or stain it, you're going to want to apply the stain and the dye first. Then you'll go back in and apply the Aqua Coat over the top of that to fill the grain before you put your final clear coats on. If you're going to be using a water-based or an alcohol-based dye or stain, you'll need to fix that color into the wood before you apply the Aqua Coat. If you don't, when you start to apply the Aqua Coat, you can reactivate the dye and lift some of the color out of the wood. So what you would do is apply the dye or the stain, let it thoroughly dry. Then you're going to want to fix it into place using a good product to use is like Zinsser's Bullseye Spray-On Shellac. And you'll just spray a light coating over the entire surface and let that dry. And that will lock the color into the wood so that you can apply the Aqua Coat without fear of reactivating that color and causing it to raise up out of the wood. So the way I apply this is really simple. I just take my cloth and I get some of it on there, and then I just apply it using a circular motion. And as you can see, it's clear. Now there is a little bit of an odor to it, but it is very minimal. And it's not that harmful, so you don't really have to worry about causing any problems. You know, you should always work at a well-ventilated area no matter what. It's just common sense not to be sucking in a lot of vapors and fumes from anything that is chemical. And even though this is water-based, it is chemical. But I use a circular motion, and that works it well into the grain. And it does have a decent work time, so I will go back and forth over it just to make sure that I'm getting it pressed down into the grain. And you want to try to get it fairly smooth. Now on this guitar body, I'm just going to worry about doing the top. The mahogany back and sides is less of an issue. The pores are much smaller, and I'm using polyurethane on this guitar as a finish. So what I did was I put down the polyurethane first, let that dry, and then I'm going back over with this grain filler on this ash. Ash is so porous and grainy that to get it filled, you really got to use a pore filler. I could also use it on the mahogany, but it's really not necessary in this case. So I'm just going to use it on this ash and get it completely filled in. Okay, so now that I have completely covered the surface with the Aqua Coat, what I'm going to do is let this dry, and it'll take at 70 degrees Fahrenheit with moderate humidity. I think my humidity right now is at about 40%. I live in Colorado, so the humidity here is fairly low. This should dry in about 30 to 40 minutes. Then I can go back and lightly sand the surface and apply a second coat. All right, well, it's been about 30-40 minutes since I applied the Aqua Coat, and it is completely dry. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to sand the surface very lightly with some 220 grit sandpaper. And all I really want to do is just sort of lightly abrade the surface so I can apply a second coat and it will adhere properly. A couple of things I should mention that I didn't mention before. Even though the product does not take dye or stain after it's been applied and dried, you can mix dye with the product while it's still wet before you apply it. So you could, scoop out a spoonful into a separate container and then add a drop or two of trans tint, for example, or any other, liquid aniline type dye, and then mix it up and then apply it. And that's a great way to really pop out the grain. If you want to accentuate it, you can add some, like a dark color like black or a dark brown, a burnt umber, raw umber type color, and then apply it, let it dry, and then sand it back so that it just remains in the grain. So that's something you can do with it before applying it. But once it's applied, it's not going to take stain. That's why you want to apply your stain and your dye before you apply this, because it won't take it after it's been dried. So all I'm going to do now is just lightly sand the surface. And I'm just going to sand it really lightly. I'm not going to try to get it perfectly level, because if I sand through, I run the risk of removing some of the, in this case I used polyurethane before to give it that kind of a warm color. If I used like a stain or a dye color, like a blue, green, red, whatever, if I sand too aggressively, I could sand through it into the wood. And even though it's not fatal, it's just kind of a pain to fix it. So all I want to do now is just knock back some of the high spots. And you can see it powders up really nicely. And after I've sanded it, I want to wipe off all that excess powder, because I don't want that to mix into it. You can also dilute this product with water if need be. Just scoop some out into a separate container, add a little bit of water, and stir it in. That can be useful on woods which have a tighter grain and pore structure that this product straight out of the can may be too thick to fill. So okay, so that is the second coat, and I'll let this dry like I did the previous one for about 30 to 40 minutes. Then I'll come back and I will lightly sand it smooth. I'll reassess and decide whether or not I need to put a third coat on, but I really doubt that I'm going to have to do that. I think that the grain is going to be nicely filled. So with it sanded smooth, I can start applying whatever clear coat that I want to put on top of it. And in this case, I'm just going to be putting polyurethane, which it's a polyurethane oil mix, which I will rub in by hand, and that will give it a nice warm glow and a good protective top coat for this wood. So there you have it. I highly recommend this product, and I will put a link in case you're interested down in the description below. Just hit show more and you'll see the link. And there you have it. So we will see you in the next episode of From the Luthier's Workbench.